Welcome to the review. I'm Rajesh Sasetna. In European culture and intellectual history, the coffee house was of aristocratic origin, with the first coffee house opening its doors under the Ottomans in Istanbul in 1555. In fact, the Ottomans then went on to export the concept to Europe. The Turks drank their coffee black without milk and sugar, and to this day, if you visit Istanbul, the coffee house has evolved to a house with a chocolate shop as well. It was the Indian Coffee House Board that established coffee houses in Lahore in 1941. These eateries became well known for intellectuals who gathered not only to drink coffee over the next 2 decades, but they also shared their intelligence, often passionate views, debating politics of the day. Historian and writer K.K. Aziz writes about the hundreds of visitors to Lahore's coffee house in his account titled The Coffee House of Lahore. Khurshid Kamal Aziz, as he was called, studied at the Government College in Lahore and was taught by greats such as Professor Ahmed Shah Patras Bukhari and Professor Sirajuddin. Later on, K.K. Aziz went on to teach politics and history at universities from Toronto to Khartoum. As a political scientist, he was a prolific writer with more than 50 books to his credit. He was also the official historian to the government and the chairman of the National Commission on Historical and Cultural Research. Sadly, he died this summer in July in Lahore. Joining me tonight are Raza Rumi from Lahore. Raza Rumi is a journalist as well as a blogger. In our Karachi studios, I have with me Reza Ali Abdi, who's a journalist. You've been with the BBC for many, many years there, and Asif Nurani, a writer and journalist associated with Dawn as well. Thanks very much for coming in, gentlemen. If I may begin with you, Raza, you knew K.K. Aziz very closely. You have a fascination for history. Begin by telling us about K.K. Aziz, the man as a historian and a writer.
Well, I mean, as you mentioned, I got to know K.K. Aziz in the last decade of his life. And, you know, I'd always been a great admirer of his writings and books. And we sort of developed a friendship. I mean, he was much senior to me, so I wouldn't call that a friendship. But, you know, it was a very deep association, and I learned a lot from him. And K.K. Aziz was a very serious man. He had his lighter moments, but, you know, he was completely devoted to history and passionate about his books and his writings. And surely, you know, in Pakistan, he has been undermined, and, you know, his stature has not been recognized because he was always against the official version of truth or history, as we call it. He challenged that time and again. And his book, The Murder of History, actually exposed the various lies and the spin doctoring that had taken place within the history textbooks. So I think he died a very lonely death. And, you know, this particular book that you mentioned is one of his last books. And this was the time when he was very nostalgic about the times he had lived in, particularly his early days in Batala, pre-partition, and then of course Lahore's coffee house that gave him that stimuli, that intellectual sort of inspiration, and he says that in the book as well.
Let me bring in Reza Ali Abdi now. You've read the book as well. Yeah. What do you make of the writing, and of course the entire concept at the time in the 40s and 50s? The coffee house was the intellectual hub for writers, journalists, and this particular book, if we go through it, it has what is called the Roll of Honor 1, 2, Part 3, and talks about these men who were part of the coffee house culture, but then who became very prominent writers, journalists. They were in the civil service, the police force.
That, I think, is the most exciting part of this book, which makes it a good reference book which must be there on your shelf all the time. So many people have been described. It's not only brief life sketch or biography, it is sketches, personal sketches, and his personal experience, opinions about them, and it's full of anecdotes. It's a sort of storytelling which is unlike K.K. Aziz, but in this book he is different in this sense. He has done a good work of storytelling, and the anecdotes he has mentioned, and the small things about very known people which hardly anyone knows.
Detailed observations there.
Very detailed, yes. Starting from the date of birth.
Mr. Nurani, talk a bit about the entire coffee house culture and how it developed. I mean, we're aware of the historical roots. We say it came from the Ottomans, but how did it develop in pre-partition times? Because it was 1941, if I'm right.
Well, coffee house culture was there from the 18th century in England. for instance, Edison and Steele, they wrote what was termed as coffee house literature, and there were essays which were written on some very serious subjects and some very ridiculous subjects, like how many angels can sit on the tip of a needle.
So the coffee house culture was always synonymous with writers and journalists.
And in our part of the world, I don't know why Mr. K.K. Aziz has not referred to Park Tea House. Raza has mentioned it. I think there's just a passing reference to it.
There is,
Park Tea House, which was there until last year and which survived all the storms while the coffee house closed down earlier. The Park Tea House had a very important role to play in the culture of Pakistan, of Lahore, and I think it was Halqa Arbab-e-Zawq who used to have the meetings there, which was an organization which countered the progressive movement.
We'll take a short break. We'll be right back. Do stay with us.